Hey guys, I'm thinking nothing about doing this video. Um, don't know whether I'm going to lose any subs or friends, but so be it. Uh, I sort of got annoyed about the whole subject matter, and that's one reason. Let me just share my screen. In a sec. What am I doing? Okay, so this is sort of Shawn Baker's sort of response, and he was a bit peeved off, and I would be also, with the sort of language that disrespectful language that Jack uses. I got no problems him disagreeing with other people that he doesn't, that for whatever reason, but keep it respectful. It's just wrong. And it's not as if he's right on a lot of things. It's a lot of half truths in the things that he's says. Well, Shawn Baker actually put up this sort of questionnaire asking people, what do they think in importance, sort of in any nutrition was second. I would have put it first, but activity, exercise, sleep. I would have put sleep above activity and exercise. So, and then I've put exercise in third place because it actually helps with stress management. And I'd probably push stress management and all that to the bottom, and I'd basically put light number 4, circadian rhythms and all that. Sort of, I think light and sleep sort of go together in a sense. But anyway, and then he got some abuse from yours truly. And basically he insulted him and called him a smooth-brained orthopod. How colourful. I mean, telling him to stop chewing steaks. Well, I could say the thing, stop chewing kibble, Jack. Just because you're in the sun, it doesn't mitigate the effects of kibble. Now, does it? Hormones are still valid. They don't cease to exist just because there's light around. And, continues with all this sort of nonsense about his lifestyle and dietary choices. Well, you may not like those things, Jack, but in the end, that's irrelevant. Then he goes on this splurge about, chewing steak and read some real science, bro. You spread nothing but half truths. Well, so do you, Jack. So do you. Why don't you lay your cards out clearly in plain English, what your arguments are about a number of things, rather than being cryptic like a Gnostic, like the old Gnostics used to be. Deceitful people, that's what they were. And Christians were right to consider them heretical, evil people. And not that I'm claiming that you are. I just think you've got a big ego, a bit like that other guy in America that can't control his behaviour. I think you've got a similar problem. And he basically goes, and you are always have been a smooth-brained orthopod. You want some respect. Every human deserves to be treated in a respectful way, even those you disagree with. There's a difference of being comical, taking the piss out of people and stuff like that. But there's a difference of being nasty. And you won't find me or Bart being nasty. But you can be really nasty, Jack, in the way you come across. Do some real lifting. Read real science and understand how it all really works. As if you understand it, how it all really works. Jack, really? Simplicity may think it always the path to an answer, so that defines longevity. Can you basically just be a bit more clear with the way you use your language? I usually ask those people to explain parsimony of parity violation and how it explains life. I've never heard you explain it properly anyway in that regard. And I get blank stares from meatheads like you. Well, he's not a physicist. Why would he know something that, what was that guy, Chinese guy, Wu, which did the experiment back, what year? Anyway, I can't remember. I think it was in the 50s, sometime in the 50s. And, parity violation of beta decay. So what? Are you trying to impress us? Most even first year university students doing physics probably know parity violation and the mirroring. Most of the universities are left-handed, so to speak. And if you look, and if it wasn't like that, we would have been annihilated. We would have never had a beginning. So apparently, there was slightly more matter than antimatter, and the other part doesn't exist in this universe anymore, only in particle accelerators. Yes, you can, yes, there you can energize it. That's what killed the other construct of, supersymmetry. There's the other stuff that I spoke on my other channel in that regard. But, so what? Why are you using this terminology? What are you trying to prove? To basically get to a good health, you don't need to basically know parity violation or the mirroring that exists. Fuck, effing sake. And then he goes on. Gosh, I have to read this and sort of suffer even more. There is always time. When you create time by providing energy for things to manifest. Yeah, there's not much manifesting between your two ears. Humans are the universe in miniature. Really? That's mystic bullshit from places like the subcontinent. Really? Get the hell out of here. There is the Big Bang and the microwave background radiation showing there was a beginning of a universe. You may think you're the universe in miniature. So be it. Almost a caricature of nature's full complexity. So we're idolizing nature now. Very scientific of you, Jack. Human reality is like a fog on a bathroom mirror. Oh, this must be the mirroring sort of concept. You remember, the other one doesn't exist in this universe, mate. So, I don't know what sort of mirroring you're seeing. Maybe it's an antimatter mirror. Yes, could be. Yes, an anti-knowledge mirror. Oh, in the presence, incites you to wipe the mirror. God, I'm getting really excited now. And try again until you get what you want. Did you get what you wanted, Jack? This makes human reality a fluid concept. God, maybe you're identifying something different nowadays. You're into the fluid stuff. I'm into the hardcore science that tells me there are only two types of that. There's no, fluid stuff. At best, a misnomer linked to the energy in the process. It's just a whole lot of words, Jack. Convoluted words. Make a point. And that's why people find you cryptic and you're not making a point. You're just trying to act smart. Because if you were to basically lay your cards out properly, people would see through them and they would be able to verify and check them as well. And you know it. Coward. And basically, what is, as energy varies, so does the reality we experience. Your reality is really questionable, what you experience. Have you had yourself checked or medicated recently? This is what creates our differences of opinions. You've got cryptic, you use cryptic wording. Everybody else has clear opinions of what they mean and what they're saying. Whether they can back it up, that's a different thing altogether. Reality is not uniform for man. Thank God for that. I wouldn't want to live your reality, mate. Reality just does not exist unless you are observing it. Really? You think subatomic things? Remember, we observe things in the macro and micro. We can't connect the two. But you can't imply that what happens in the micro, which may be also a complete misunderstanding because we don't have the tools to investigate it properly. Have you thought about that? No. You've just you've extrapolated from the micro to the macro. Really? Just stick to your profession and leave physics alone with your mumbo jumbo. Oh, where was I? And man takes reality for granted because it is all he really knows. God, yeah, I'm going to walk through the wall. I think I can walk through the wall. Yes, I'll make a quantum leap and jump through the wall. It's not there really. Oh God, because it is what he sees. If you had your eyes checked, I would. It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery, rolled into an enigma, and buried in a paradox. God, your life is a paradox, and your cryptic mystery is rolled in the enigma called Jack Kruse. Friggin' hell, man. The reality we feel is that we all die. Thank you for telling me that. But the goal of nature wasn't that we'd live forever. Thanks for telling me that as well. I really didn't know that. Her goal, personalizing it. So you've got a little thing on the side with nature. Her goal is to create something that can sustain itself. Reality is our children are just perpetual motion machines from the past given to the present, changed by the light they get. Really, Jack? Really? You know, why don't you explain correctly how this light works? Not the bullshit that you use. You know, you could have actually explained quite clearly about the opsons and melanopsins, these things that control electromagnetism and stuff like that. You could explain this in detail properly. Why don't you? Why are you cryptic? Why do you play these games, silly games? You're an arrogant old fart that basically has no respect for other people. You know, not everyone goes and does physics. Others go and do law, engineering, and a whole lot of other professions like you did. And sometimes they don't have the time to look into these things. You know, And I question whether you've actually looked into these properly and understood them. And maybe that's why you use your cryptic language in order to play these silly little games with people that maybe have slightly less capacity to understand these. This means relativity is principally constrained by its past mitochondrial DNA. God. And the future flow of energy from the solar environment. Basically, cytochrome C, oxidase, these, God. Anyway, we'll continue reading this before I have what is called a fit. When you sort of go, I'm exasperated, I'm going to, sort of thing. Okay, relax. So basically he's talking about these chromophores, which are in like cytochrome C, which is oxidase, which is complex 4. Okay. What happens is there are other complexes as well of these opsins and remember I've talked about melanopsin and opsins in your eyes and in your body and all that, signaling and all that. Plus these opsins inside there, this chromophores, which basically chroma, that's the Greek word. I do know the Greek word. I did go to Greek school. They have senior and junior high back in Greece, and I did I was about 6 years over there. Chroma and phoreas, chromophores, color, and transporter, carrier, whatever. So what it basically means is it gets excited when these wavelengths, specific wavelengths of certain nanometers, they hit these chromophores, they get excited and they actually increase the capacity for those pumps to pump stuff through into the inner mitochondrial membrane and increase ATP production. So increase the proton gradients in those folds that I've talked about in the past. I'll keep it as simple as I can. And pretty much, can they do it on their own? Think. This is not a plant with chlorophyll, a leaf that can produce, like a large leaf, probably can produce about 21.7 millimoles, which would be equivalent to, let's say, a person who's, 70 kilos. I think about 300 millimoles. I think it's equivalent. I can't remember. It's a while ago that I measured it. And, it'd be about 7% I think it was that I calculated it. But we're not leaves. We still need food. Those ions, those hydrogen ions that we get are coming from the food. They're not coming from space. We're not generating ATP through photosynthesis. Cytochrome C just increases the pumping, the gradient, the proton gradient, the pumping of protons through into inner mitochondrial membrane, as it's called, that where the folds are, and they push against those ATPase. So without food, you can have all the light that comes through, but without food, you're not going to get those nanomotors to spin, now are you, to produce ATP? So no, light does not produce ATP. What it does is it excites these chromophores, which actually pump a bit more of those protons through. That's what happens. So let's not get overexcited and all that. And the further away you are from you need slightly more food in terms of fat to get those extra ions to be able to produce that extra ATP. And when you're closer to the tropics, because of this effect that actually happens with the pumps, and in particular, cytochrome C oxidase, complex 4, that's what it is. But it's nothing, to run home about and become overly excited. You can't become a breatharian and sit out there and go, oh, I'm getting all this ATP. You're getting minuscule amounts. Fundamentally, you still need to eat the stuff to pump more through. So really, that's all it's doing. It's just increasing the amount of ATP from food-based ions. Without those ions, you can't produce any more. So fundamentally, if you're away from the tropics, you just eat slightly more fat, and you get those extra iron. That you get the same amount of production anyway, more or less. It's just you're running the ATPs at a higher RPM for slightly longer than you would in the tropics. So what? If you've got eating an animal-based diet that is far more nutrient dense, that provides all the cofactors you need, like the flavins, the FAD, like the NAD stuff, like you get those from the micronutrients, because there's a whole lot of cofactors for all these enzymes that are operating in the complexes, then it all works. But carnivore diet's going to give you that stuff. Our meathead diet is going to give us that. Jack, your kibble, which is high in deuterium, isn't. There's a fundamental difference. You keep on munching on that kibble, mate. You keep on munching on that kibble and getting the high deuterium and damaging your ATPase and thinking that the sun will save you. Clown. Oh. And then, do I need to read the rest? I'm not going to read the rest. You get the drift. And I had some other which I made my arguments here. He's an arrogant man. Basically misuses physics and blah, 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 blah. I said a few things there. And what else did I say further down? Somebody liked that, didn't they? And further down to this other clown who came and tried to have a go at me about absorption and all this sort of stuff. They're sort of they get this sort of mouthpieces of that, and they just spew it out like dribble. Shame. I'll read it. I'm using the other browser. All biological matter, because this guy talks about, oh, God, it drives me up the wall. Why does every aromatic amino acid has absorption and emission spectrum of light? He's probably heard that from Jack and sort of just repeating like a parrot. And so I go, all biological matter emits light and emits and absorbs it. Fool, because he's a fool. And crackpots like Kruse are way out there on the speculative ideas front, because they're just making a whole lot of claims they can't back up. So what if matter does? I mean, I've told you about those chromophores, the opsins, and the melanopsin, that we've got. So what? Fundamentally, you still need food to basically, yes, those things can be excited. Jack, excited? Yes, they can be excited and actually increase the proton gradients. Yes. But, you still need the food. Without the food, where's it going to come from? So very reductionist of you, Jack. Very reductionist. Just focused on one aspect, ignoring the rest. Food is not important. Really? So where are you going to get the ions? You're not a leaf, Jack, unless you want to identify as a plant. Who am I to tell you not to identify as plant? But I'd get yourself checked by a psychiatrist if you do identify as a plant. And, I sort of go, the body isn't electric, because the other guy was saying the body's electric. Really? Zap, zap, zap. And neither is the universe, the other sort of way out there theory. And we don't observe anything like it for both in the universe and in our bodies. It exists electroneutrality, and in our bodies that is achieved via the regulation by osmolytes, albumin, taurine, one of my favorites, you know that, kiddies, don't you? Sorbitol and others. I can't remember the others. There are some others as well, of positively and negatively charged ions for, well, you have to call them what they are. Regurgitating some speculative half-truths you heard from Jack just makes you sound like a real ignorant fool. I have used the word quite often, haven't I, there? Kiddies. Yes. You can see the Tassie. Yes, his Tassie Highness is very annoyed with this young chap. In the past, I'd spoken to Bart Kay. I just talk about the debate and all that. That's when he had him on his channel. I tried to get on there, but he didn't want anyone else there. I wonder why Jack didn't want anyone else to appear on that live stream. Yes. My reply to him is, if I'm dumb, then it should be easy for him to sort of disprove me in plain English. It has to be in plain English, no cryptic bullshit with me, Jack. You have to lay your cards out so that it's apparent to all viewers, and that my replies in plain English can be judged as well. I'll lay my cards out. I've got no problems laying my cards out. He likes working cryptically, so fools like you think he's smarter than he really is. I don't doubt that he's smart in his profession. He's not a dumb man. But in this area, dabbling in biophysics and dabbling in physics and stuff like that, yeah, he's really, read a couple of books, Jack? Is that what you did? He will fail on first principles of physics, like all these crackpot speculators do. Because like Bart brings people back to first principles, so do I. And when they make an argument, they have to prove that it can't invalidate first principles. Oh, stop sharing. That's it. So first principles are always fundamental. When something somebody argues fails first principles, then it's a bust, because those things have been observed and measured. Okay? They're not constructs. They're not made up shit. There's a difference. And that's where a lot of these people, that they take certain things in a very reductionist way, or they try to put certain things together in a model which is problematic. And this is not the first time. Many people do. There's two sort of philosophical thinking in the sort of the philosophy of science. One is empiricism, and the other one is sort of rationalism. So like rational economics, and other areas like of modeling. So they believe with models, they can construct a universe, they can construct climate, they can construct all sorts of things, models for human health, models for everything. The reality is garbage in, garbage out. That's the reality. People talked about the multiverse, that you had to have, but for the string theory, for little strings where you don't need God to basically create everything in the universe, all the subatomic particles, in order to basically generate all the matter that we see in the universe, you basically needed something like strings. And to basically explain the complexity, you needed the multiverse. But the mathematics that were constructed, the underlying thing that binded them together was supersymmetry. Without supersymmetry, that construct falls apart. So it's a bit like the climate stuff. Their Achilles heel is the carbon path. But that's for another day. I've explained that in other videos. So these two groups, one, empiricists, which is people like myself, Bart, we go, well, things that are observed and measured properly and can be measured by others and find there is a bit of fuzziness, but more or less find the same. And on the other side, experimental, where controlled experiments can be replicated. That's what we call science. That's been proven. Because anyone can do it. If they do it in the same fashion, they'll get the same result. Now, in complex systems, that's much harder to do because there's too many moving variables. And there you can only approximate and speculate. And a lot of people do it. I tend to avoid doing that and accept that it is really hard to know. We do not have the technology, the instruments to basically investigate and measure the universe, the world, the human body in such absolute detail to be able to empirically say, yes, definitely. So all we have is things like with the human diet, for instance, we have the N15 data to fall back, the archaeological, that we can really go, well, as a species, that's what we ate most of the period of time. Other species ate that for the last 1,000 years. When we look at the remains of our ancestors that switched to agriculture, we see our health going into hell in a handbasket. I think it's pretty much we can go with that information. We don't need to do these silly fabricated studies with so many moving parts. It's like, God, it's like sand. That's what their foundation is, sandy, And that's the problem with a lot of these people that think I'm more than capable of saying I don't know certain things. And that's the truthful thing to say when you don't know. And to be quite clear, I have these and these opinions and they're speculations. And it's based on this and this data, and it's the best I can give you. That's one thing to say, and it's a different thing to use cryptic language and play silly little games. And on the other hand, people like Shawn, with Rivero and all that, are helping a lot of people that have got a lot of bad health problems, and they're reversing a lot of, health problems in the US. And many others like Shawn are doing this here. And the last thing, they need to be insulted by Jack, just because Shawn doesn't understand physics. So what, Jack? So effing what? I do. I used to do quite well as a student. 20 out of 20, I used to get 18 or 19 when I tried harder. So I wasn't a bad student. But, you pick on people that you find are soft targets. You should be ashamed of yourself. Really, mate? You should be really ashamed of yourself. I wasn't going to, initially I thought about, should I do this? And, maybe I'll upset my friend Bart Kay. Who knows? And some other people will bail out on me and all that. you know. But, you know, I have to say, I have to be thankful towards Shawn because he did have me on his um, channel, and I did a bit of a spew. I gave a few things about you know, certain areas of nutrition, other things like that I actually discussed, and my health issues in the past and stuff like that. It gave me an opportunity. I got a few subs out of it. So I'm thankful for people that are nice, that give me an opportunity and all that. And I don't like seeing other people, you know, insulting people like that. I generally don't do this sort of stuff. I usually, when people make certain claims, I don't even mention their names. I come in, I do my videos, and I basically say, well, they're making these claims. Here I can show you an inverse relationship. If something's causal, it must always, associate. If it's inverse, it's a bust. So I do those sort of things, show some mechanisms, and that they can't be both can't be true. So it invalidates some of the claims that people make. And that's what I approach, and provide some general information to people that can be useful, some biohacks and stuff like that, like with Physatin as a senolytic, and how to use it, and other things like that. But beyond that, that's the purpose of my channel. Try to help people, as I've suffered health issues myself in the past, help people and do things like that, and provide some information and make it in plain English so, the average person can understand it. But even people that are just lawyers and accountants and people like that. I've got friends that are like that. They don't understand physics. They don't understand biochemistry. They don't understand biophysics. So, but they do watch my channel. But if I don't make it accessible to them and make it a very sciencey thing, I'll lose probably 90% of my subscribers. So, because the majority of people are not scientists. That's a small percentage of the population, and a small percentage of the population that has an interest in hardcore science. I may sit around reading. I used to read physics letters when I was younger and things like that, and Nature and whatever else. Well, then I could get it from the university, which was cheaper because I didn't have to pay for it. But at the end of the day, most people don't have access to that information, or have too many other things in their life. And if somebody's going to put an argument like Jack, I have no problems with people putting arguments. And if he can back it up with good evidence, and I look at it and go, yep, it's good evidence, I'll accept it. But there's a difference between good, sound evidence and playing cryptic games that he does, and he's not clear about it. And he throws all these terms and, colourful things, and, it's all sophistry type talk. It's a very sophistry type approach. And it tries to belittle other people. It's insulting. It's like having a conversation with somebody who's just continues insulting you right through. It's abusive. That's what it is. He may not understand it. I really feel for his family if he behaves like that around them. It's an extremely abusive way to deal with other people. So I don't know. Some people may agree with him, and you may be psychopaths and agree that you can be insulting, and that's nice and colourful for you. But personally, I think that he has a very poor bedside manner. He has many issues in terms of the way he socialises and the way he interacts with people. And after seeing that, I still subscribe to him. I'll have to unsubscribe because most people that have been on Bart's channel, and Bart tells us to subscribe, I've subscribed. But I will be definitely unsubscribing. I need to find it. But the thing is, his insulting attitude is just beyond the pale. if you disagree with something that Shawn said, Jack, do a video and explain exactly where in plain English so people can understand, not your cryptic bullshit, in plain English, why you believe certain things that Shawn says are wrong. And then the rest of us can pick it apart, But you're too chicken shit, aren't you? You're weak. You're a coward. And all cowards use sophistry and insults like this because you're not prepared to talk plain so people can see through your bullshit. Anyway, you've upset me. That's why I responded in this way. Normally, I don't, but when I see this sort of behaviour in our community, it's, unacceptable, Jack. Unacceptable. Grow up. You're an old man. Grow up. You're more similar to me. I'm 59, you're 60. A year difference. We're not young spring chickens anymore. We need to learn to be wise old men and have some behaviour and some humility as well. Because the longer you're on this planet, you'll realise how little you understand and know. Wise people do understand that. It's when you're young you think you know everything. That's the biggest wisdom we acquire with old age. It seems you haven't. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. See yous.